Antonio Conte has won Napoli's 4th Scudetto. The newspapers, they love him. Everybody loves Napoli this week. If you haven't seen behind us, Dan, Emmet, David in the studio here in London, we've got all the Napoli kits from the previous decades. Some of them glorious, some not, unfortunately. But this is the season where Antonio Conte has brought them back from the depths of despair. 10th place last season, first in 2025. And we're going to talk about the coach, the man himself. He's from Lecce, and we're going to bring that up. He's the first Southern coach to do a particular thing, but we'll get there. We're going to talk about how good he is. Is he the world's best? We're going to talk about who else could have done this in Naples, in Serie A in general, and we're going to compare him to some other great coaches as well. Talk a little bit about his Premiership time as well. Ready to go, boys?
Yeah, always ready.
Dan, could anybody else have done this?
Well, Antonio Conte said that this was a miracle winning the league with Napoli, and I don't quite know whether that's true or not. I don't think it was a miracle. But at the same time, could have another manager done it? Probably not. Probably not, because as you two well know, you were in Naples yourself, Napoli is a club that has a dynamic different from any other club in Italy. The pressure is enormous, which is ironic because you normally associate pressure with teams that win all the time. Napoli do not win all the time, but the pressure on them is enormous. They are expected to compete, even though they are not one of the traditional powerhouses of Italian football. But Antonio Conte is the one manager. We said this at the start of the season. If he comes in, he can do well for two reasons. Because Antonio Conte answers to himself and himself only. And because Napoli had no European football to deal with. And those are the conditions he loves more than anything else. He wants his team to be focused on a 38-game campaign in the league. Go out there, play your goods out week in, week out. And the third aspect of that is the De Laurentiis allowed him to sign the players he really wanted. Conte might not want world-class players, but he wants players who are Antonio Conte players. Again, we mentioned this at the start of the season. We mentioned it throughout the season. Romelu Lukaku, Scott McTominay, two Antonio Conte players, if I've ever seen a pair of Antonio Conte players.
That speaks to his football IQ, surely.
Yeah. And sure enough, they were instrumental in the start of the run.
Instrumental. Emmet, you were there. Have you recovered from the smoke inhalation? We were both there. I was inside the stadium. You were there in Piazza Plebiscito amongst a couple 100,000 people. Maniacs, but polite maniacs, as we've been able to assess. How are you doing after your trip to Naples? And could anybody else have done this?
Yeah, I mean, it was absolutely exhausting being in the piazza for 6 hours, side by side with people of all ages. You know, the scenes were incredible. It was like something from Apocalypse Now. There was smoke, there was flares, there was fireworks, there was flags, there was alcohol, there was cigarettes, there was everything you could imagine. It was just a carnival-like atmosphere, and it was just...
And you wrote a piece on it this week, destination.calcio.com, if you haven't read that.
And it was on my experience in the city that day, because anybody who's been to Naples in general knows there's a frenetic energy about the place. It's kind of hard to articulate. You just have to be there to feel it.
And it's a shrine to Diego.
Yeah, exactly. Even on the most tranquil days, Napoli has a certain type of element to it that just makes it chaotic. But when you get there, when we got there on Friday, it had multiplied by 1 million.
Yeah.
The tension, the pressure, the anxiety that maybe they just might screw it up, because the pressure was all on them. Because obviously they were a point ahead of Inter. They were at home to Cagliari. Cagliari had nothing to play for, and those are the kind of teams that are most dangerous. When there is no pressure, they can just go out and play for the joy of playing.
But they managed to do this, and tell us, could anybody else have created this front page on the nation's biggest newspapers? Antonio Conte.
Yeah, I mean, I think as Dan said, the one thing that worked in Conte's favour was the fact that it was one game a week. If there's any manager in the world who loves playing once a week...
Still, could anybody else have managed to win only playing one game a week with this squad? Could anybody else have moulded these players?
Are you talking managers in Italy or managers?
Anyone. You give me a name on the planet. Anybody else that could step in and actually do this.
I always wanted to see Jurgen Klopp in Naples, because he's someone who is shown at Liverpool. He buys into the ethos of the city first and foremost, and then he shapes the ethos of the team around the ethos of the city. But having said that, I think that what Conte's doing really well, and Emmet alluded to the fact that Napoli is a frenetic place at the best of times. Conte hasn't bought into that. He hasn't sort of gone out and said, "Oh, I love being in Naples. I love all about it." He's gone about it the way he would have gone about winning the league with Inter. It's like, this is the way I'm going to win the league. This is my approach. Regimented, strict, structured, call it whatever you want to call it, but it works.
Well, didn't he do the same with Inter when he took over? Obviously, Inter were known as Pazza Inter for any of the viewers out there. Pazza means crazy, and Inter have a tendency to do crazy things. And Conte was like, no, we're not doing this Pazza Inter thing. We're going to win. We're going to do it my way. It's going to be Juventus-like. It's going to be regimented, strict. We're going to get the job done. And he did the same with Naples.
Do you think Arrigo Sacchi was able to help him? He says here in the La Gazzetta dello Sport in Sacchi's column that he spoke to Conte frequently during the season. Conte would just give him a call, just like we did when we interviewed him on his birthday. And of course, he didn't give us any tips on how to win the Scudetto, but he did for Conte. And Gazzetta also saying, Conte, sei tu la stella, you are the star, more so than the players. That is the general feel.
Yeah.
And although McFratma, Dan wearing the McFratma jersey, the shirt there with, I think they've done a little bit of a touch up to his face to make him look a bit more Braveheart there.
I was going to say,
bit of Mel
like
Gibson.
William
They were
Wallace
running out.
feel to it,
They were running out of the other ones, and that was one of the last ones we could get, along with the Campione one and a couple others here. The Campione one between Dan and Emmet there, but everyone's saying that Conte. This was okay. If you took Conte out of this and just put, for example, I don't know, even Simone Inzaghi, McTominay, Lukaku, I don't think you get the same tune out of them, especially McTominay, as you said at the beginning, that he wanted specific parts for his machine. McTominay was able to fit that. And to me, he's turned Scott McTominay into a Pavel Nedved at Lazio in 2000 when they were able to win.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing.
Who else could do it?
I agree. I think when McTominay is... You have the combination of two things here. It's Conte wanting a specific player, but also McTominay joining a manager who has such a clear identity and a clear vision. And he didn't get that with Ten Hag and Manchester United because he was played here, there, and everywhere. It was the same case.
Put Ten Hag in Napoli then. We still need to address the question: who else could do this? Is there a name that comes close? You said Jurgen Klopp, but
yeah,
I think Simone Inzaghi might be the closest, but I don't think Simone Inzaghi would have got the job done with these type of players. So it's hard to think of one particular manager.
Even Carlo Ancelotti had a turn in Naples.
I don't think Simone Inzaghi would have taken the job had it become available.
Oh, of course, but there's no way that you dip down from Inter or
No,
Juventus.
even if the job had become available after he was allowed to, I don't think he would have taken it. There has been risk averse on the pitch, and there has been risk averse off it when you decide which clubs you're joining. And I think we were all surprised when Conte joined Napoli because, for the reason we just mentioned, being so structured, so stringent in his approach, it's not qualities you will associate normally with a city like Naples, with a team like Napoli. And De Laurentiis is not the easiest person to deal with in terms of dynamic with the manager and the chairman.
Does it take someone with a Southern mentality to win with a Southern club like this, with this kind of squad? Because Spalletti was able to do it. He's from Tuscany, that's fine. But he had a very good group of players. We've seen a lot of those leave. Osimhen, Zielinski has left since then. We've seen also a couple of other big part players, Nathan and Ostergaard and a few others. But we saw Kvaratskhelia leave. That was a dagger, at least to the playing roster. I was happy he left from a Napoli perspective because I knew that what he was going through with his agent and trying to almost ransom Napoli into selling him kind of hijacks that project just overall. And Conte, I think, although he would have been upset, thinking, I'm going to come in, we've got Kvaratskhelia, and that's going to at least get us to the Champions League. And sure, Kvaratskhelia had a great first few months, but he left, and all of a sudden Conte's left with filling the void with, I guess, Raspadori was able to step up. And, McTominay obviously did his part, but David Neres was injured for a lot of it. He was Kvara's replacement. Lukaku was Osimhen's replacement. And Zielinski, I guess it's McTominay, isn't it? So how do you manage to do that and stay in contention and even to defeat Atalanta away, Fiorentina away, big results on the road? They only lost 4 this season. Best defense in the league. Rachmani, one of the kings of Serie A this season. How do you go into a club that's just been in disarray with 3 coaches and then be able to compete, even though they only have to play 1 game every week. Still, no other coach can do this, in my opinion. And let's go through Conte's career just quickly. Gazzetta going through, and it all started in 2005 to 11. That was with the Bari Siena. Obviously, you've got the Juventus Subito Scudetto. He was able to come in, and Emmet, you can speak to this. The way he came into Juventus and was able to make his tweaks. Was he post Del Neri?
Yeah, he come in the summer of 2011. Del Neri had taken Juve to 7th, and he'd come in, and basically in his first training session, he got the players together, and he basically said, "Lads, it's time to stop being rubbish. Juve don't finish 7th twice in a row, because the season before they'd also finished 7th."
Boom song.
No, it was kind of before.
Krasic?
This was like Quagliarella, Agent Del Piero, Krasic, that era. Conte came in and said, I know.
Jorge Andrade.
Kind of a bit before he'd retired, I think, but it was a bad Juve. It was a mix between a young Marchisio and like elder statesman like Del Piero. He came in and he said, "Lads, right, we've got to stop being rubbish. It's time to get to work." First season, Juve won the league undefeated. They edged out Milan, and that was the arguably one of the last great Milan teams. It was Thiago Silva, there was Zlatan before they were sold to PSG.
They just won it as well.
And they were the reigning champions. They won it the year before. And he came in and he basically, it was a bit like what he done with this Napoli team. He started off 4-3-3. Pirlo had just arrived. He got the best out of Chiellini and Bonucci, put them together. He revitalised Gigi in nets. He had Quagliarella and Matri up front, but he had Vidal there. Vidal and Marchisio, a bit like McTominay, got a lot of the goals in midfield. I think Vidal and Marchisio got like 20 between them that
Do you
season.
think Marchisio has had an effect on Conte since he's left there, because he needed a midfielder to be able to make goals and score them?
Yeah, that's the one thing that he never had at Spurs, which is why Spurs are the only club he hasn't won anything with since leaving Siena, since Brett making into like the big league, so to speak, like Juve, Inter Milan, Chelsea. Spurs are the only.
Yeah,
team
he's
he
won
hasn't-
everywhere except at Tottenham.
Just going back to the Juventus spell, he won 3 there.
Yeah.
He was there for 3 seasons, won 3.
And his last season, he got 102 points. And I think he was the first coach in Serie A history to get triple digits in a single
and he was
season.
off. Wouldn't it be something even bigger than that to come into Juventus, and they were in disarray, just like Napoli this season? A team of talented individuals, but some that needed to be cleared out. A couple of big players that would have been able to leave. Del Piero went over to the A-League at the time, and I guess he was 38 at the time. But Osimhen's left, Kvara's left, Zielinski left. He's won the Scudetto there. Wouldn't it be even bigger if he was able to manage 3 in a row in Naples?
Yeah.
That would be much more difficult than winning with Juventus, who have a bigger cash flow and also have that prestige behind them, the tradition. To be able to do that in Naples, we were there for the party on the weekend.
Yeah.
I think Vesuvius would legitimately explode and maybe wipe out Pompeii once more. So
I don't think the Napoli are, not just this kind of Napoli, any Napoli, I don't think they're built for continued success.
Yeah, they're
because, as you said, it's just everything is so all-consuming in the city and within the club that you either are up or you're down. There is no in between.
But surely with a coach that wants to stay, and as Spalletti left in 2023.
But it's exhausting for them as well. You see, Spalletti 2 years ago, he said that he was exhausted by being in charge of Napoli. Conte's
I still think,
hinted that he's tired as well.
Yeah.
with full respect to Spalletti, he won the Scudetto then, now he's the Nazionale coach. That's fine. But if I was him, I probably would have left, because I wouldn't want my reputation to be tainted the next season when I don't win it.
Exactly, that's what I mean.
Because you're not hailed as a hero.
Yeah.
You know, they might take your effigies away and the rest of it. So
And I think, as Dan said earlier, it's tough to work under De Laurentiis, because Spalletti has talked about this in his book that he released, and he talked about when they won the Scudetto, the first in 33 years, De Laurentiis didn't even so much as pick up the phone to congratulate him or the players. So there is that dynamic of working on De Laurentiis can be exhausting. And Spalletti has talked,
there's a lot of ego there,
Yeah, exactly.
but you have to have an ego to come in and manage as well, and Conte would have that.
Yeah.
Sure, but De Laurentiis, I think, is the sort of chairman who, I mean, I'm not saying that he thinks that he's won the Scudetto himself, but he's certainly...
Yeah.
The way he walked out, coming out the other night.
exactly.
He tries to make it all about himself. I mean, obviously, like he's made his fortune in the movie industry, so he knows how to, to pick his stage and all the rest of it. But I do think that, like that's what Conte was so great at Juventus, because everyone at Juventus sort of like took a step back and allowed him to dominate the scene, dominate the limelight. Whereas Emmet pointed out, De Laurentiis is not going to allow you to do that.
Just one more point before we move on to the next bit. We're going to talk about Chelsea, but the way that he's been able to come in with a professional mentality and do the job at Juventus and win 3 in a row after being given sort of half a squad, and he's done that in Naples. Maybe the fact that he's from the south, he understands a lot of Naples as a city, was able to deal with it. He expressed his gratitude at the fans singing his name at the beginning of his tenure. Usually, if you go to other clubs, they don't really care about the coach until you win something. There, he's gone and they've said, abbiamo visto Conte, which is a dedication to Diego. We all know that. And he probably felt more at home. He was able to engage with Southerners in a specific way, hailing from Lecce, hailing from Puglia, great city as well.
Yeah,
Lecce survived. But, that could also be a dynamic that most wouldn't account for, having that Southern mentality, having won in the North, having won in England, and then coming back to use all that experience and be able to harness, I guess, the dregs of what Spalletti had, and then be able to recycle that and use all his Southern powers to be able to win with a Southern club, first time in history anyone's ever done it. So congratulations to Antonio Conte for that. Let's look at his time in the Premier League with Chelsea, 2016 to 2018. Dan, you can speak to this. He won a couple of things.
Yeah, he won the Premier League with Chelsea, and he won the FA Cup following season. I think when the title with Chelsea, I often feel like he gets sort of lost in the weeds a bit because everyone associates Conte with Juventus and Inter Milan and Napoli now, of course, but the way he won the title with Chelsea was mightily impressive, and I think it does speak to the character of Antonio Conte, because early in the season they were battered by Arsenal away from home, and it completely changes.
Was it 3 or 4-0 in
3-0.
that game?
It was 3-0,
They were massacred.
Yeah, and it could have been more, to be fair. It was a case of like them losing 3-0 on the scoreline, flattering Chelsea, and it just decided to switch his formation to 3 men at the back, basically 3-5-2, sort of a hybrid 3-5-2, 3-4-3. And nobody thought, you don't win the league in England with the 3-man defense. You didn't at the time anyway. And they went on an amazing run, and they literally never looked back, and they stormed to the title. And it does show you, I think, a side of Conte that while he's very structured and he's very pragmatic, and he kind of come across as dogmatic at times, I think, because his desire to win is all consuming. There is a side of him that is an incredibly shrewd tactician, and obviously he's not a revolutionary in the way Saki was, or in the way Helene Herrera, to go further back, may have been, but he's incredibly shrewd from a tactical standpoint, and he can adapt a lot more than people give him credit for. And you saw it this season with Napoli. Started the season with, again, his 3-5-2, 3-4-3. Then McTominay came into his own, and then he switched to a 4-man defense, and it was a case of 4-3-3 at one point. Then it was a case of like having McTominay as sort of like as a second striker alongside Lukaku. Then it was a case of having him as a midfielder, crashing the box with Kvaratskhelia and Raspadori on the wings. So there is definitely that about Conte. He's brilliant at making the most of the tools he's got. I'm not saying that he wins title on a budget, because he doesn't. He spends money, but then he gets the players he has.
He doesn't have a single system, and he
doesn't,
forces shoehorns players. Yeah, he adapts.
The challenge at the time.
Exactly.
And he can adapt.
When you compare, I think, for example, like we were talking about Simone Inzaghi. Simone Inzaghi, I think, is a lot more. It would be a lot harder to see Simone Inzaghi veer away from his 3-5-2 if you went to another club. Then it would be for Conte to instead thinking, might go to Roma next season, thinking, hang on a minute, a 4-4-2 here, I may work better than a 4-5-1.
Yeah.
He
looks at his player squad.
Yeah, you could see him doing that.
And that's what all the best coaches have did throughout history.
Well, exactly. Yeah. I mean, Antonio Conte's system is Antonio Conte's system. There is no actual formation to it. It's his system. And wherever he goes, it makes it work.
Well, commiserations to Inter supporters out there, because you've just narrowly missed out this season to defend the title, which is always easier said than done. We all picked Inter at the start of the season, but it took an Inter man, a former Inter winner there, Antonio Conte, and Romelu Lukaku to outdo them. And of course, Simone Inzaghi, obviously some injuries, fighting on 3 or 4 fronts. Napoli weren't. But Inter, he won there he was there from 2019 to 2021. He won the Scudetto there. He then went off to Tottenham, didn't have the best time. then
Gave
we've
us some great press conferences, though.
Yeah. Well, a very entertaining coach. We'll say he's been very calm this season compared to that. He's done most of his dramatics on the touchline, as Adam Summerton said last week. If you haven't seen that, go and watch it now. It's on our YouTube channel. Il capolavoro a Napoli 2024-2025. His great work in Naples. That is where this Gazzetta piece finishes with him, and they are calling him the big star of Naples. Let's compare him to a couple of other coaches that may be able to be in his cohort, we'll say, because now Conte, in terms of Italian football, has won 5 Scudetti as a player, 5 as a coach. That takes him above Fabio Capello to 10 collective titles.
And it's done so with 3 different clubs as
Capello,
well.
Which is the first.
It's the first, but
First ever with 3 clubs. That's a good point. And one of them, Napoli. I mean, come on. Juventus and Inter, that's more or less expected when you go there. Those clubs compete every single year. Maybe not Juventus this year, Emmet, but you know what I mean. They're expected to challenge. And when a coach like a Conte, or let's go back in time, whether it's a Lippi or a Capello or an Ancelotti, they're always there to compete for first place. They never say, we'll just make Champions League. They want to compete and win. So who else is in his category? If he's at the top of the list in terms of Italian football, what other names?
I think it's hard to look past Giovanni Trapattoni. Won 6 Scudetti with Juve in that legendary 76 to 86 run. Won the European Cup in tragic circumstances. Won the UEFA Cup. Won the Cup Winners' Cup. And then come back for a second spell at the beginning of the 90s. Won the UEFA Cup with Baggio. So definitely Trapp is in the argument, I would say, as definitely one of the greats.
Let me give you a few names. Here is the Corriere. So obviously, una cosa grande, a massive thing. Corriere dello Sport. And we're going to turn to page, page 9. And they've got a dedication to Conte, his 10th title. And they've got the list of players here. Now, as you said, Trapattoni coming in at 7 and 2. 2 as a player, 7 as a coach. So in terms of coaching, I guess it is Trapp, isn't it? Because underneath there is Ara, just 2 and 6 as a player. So a better player than a coach. Allegri at 6, no titles as a player, obviously. Cesarini, led home. So some big names. Lippi, 5, obviously didn't win as a player. And Mancini, 3 and 2, coach and player, respectively. Go down, there's Ancelotti, just the 1 Italian title as a coach.
It's mad that he's won more as a player than as a coach. And when you think of Ancelotti, he's one of the greats of modern times.
Especially in terms of Champions League football.
Yeah.
He's the record holder.
He's Mr. Champions
So
League.
in that category, Ancelotti is number 1. And then we've got Conte, equal with, in my opinion, Trapattoni
I think you'll have to
and Capello.
Yeah, I was going to say Capello. I think there are probably more similarities between Conte and Capello than many people would like to admit. Because Capello came in. I mean, when you look back now to what he's won, you see at Milan with Capello's dominance of the early 90s and mid 90s. But Capello came in to replace Arrigo Sacchi. I can't think of many. Apart from maybe replacing Sir Alex Ferguson United, I can't think of many more difficult jobs than replacing Sacchi at AC Milan, even though he'd only won the league once.
Yeah.
You were talking a lot about Serie A at its absolute peak.
He had some team, though, didn't he?
Yeah.
Well,
And he made that Milan team more dominant because, as you alluded
They
to,
went on that record run, didn't
Yeah.
Sacchi had only won 1 league title in 4 years. Capello won
4
3
and
in a
5.
row.
Yeah, he won 4 and 5.
Yeah. And they went unbeaten for 18 months.
Yeah.
Like it was 58 games. They were the original Invincibles. And then
who beat them? I think it was Napoli, wasn't it?
Parma.
Was it
Tino
Parma?
Tino
What about
Espria, free kick.
the Di Canio goal as well?
That was after.
Yeah.
Was it after? But
Yeah.
did Parma get a draw out of them? Or
No,
did
they
beat
won.
them?
No, they
Parma
won,
won.
yeah. I mean, but back then AC Milan barely conceded goals. let
Yeah.
alone
Like
lose
they
games.
won the league conceding, what was it, 18 goals in 34 games?
Yeah.
They only scored 34.
Yeah.
But I think, as you said, Dan, Capello was the ultimate league manager.
Yeah.
You know, he won the league with Milan. He won the league with Juve. He won the league with Roma. I know Juve's were revoked because of Calciopoli, but he's still
Well, that's
league.
Capello's
Yeah.
10th would be that.
Yeah.
Because that's been struck
Yeah.
off the record.
He went to
Otherwise he'd
Real
have
Madrid.
6 and 4 as
Yeah.
a player, 4,
Yeah.
6
Yeah.
as a coach, but he's got 5 in this list.
And also with Capello, I think like with Conte, a lot of people think, well, Capello is a great manager, but it's not like a sort of a Saki or like a Renus Michel's figure where, they come in and like they leave a massive legacy from a tactical standpoint, which is true to a point. But as you said, he made an already stellar AC Milan side even harder to beat.
Yeah.
So it's got to be Ancelotti away in Champions League is the best.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then we've got Conte, Capello, Trapattoni.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think also, obviously, showing a little bias here, Marcello Lippi in with the shout. Lippi broke Capello's dominance with Juve in 30 years ago, 94, 95. Then he won 2 of the next 3, left, and then come back and won another 2.
And of course, we're going to go back to the genesis, which is Arrigo Sacchi creating that type of football, reinventing Italian football.
One thing that is interesting as well when you look at the names we've just mentioned is that Trapattoni, Lippi, and Capello, they all went back. Trapattoni went back to Juventus after a successful spell. He left and then he went back and he won again. Lippi did the same. He was obviously dominant in the mid-90s, broke AC Milan's hegemony on Italian football, then left for Inter Milan and went back to Juventus and won again. Capello, of those 3, is the only one who left to AC Milan, then came back to AC Milan and was nowhere near as successful. As neither was Sacchi. They followed each other's path very closely.
And they're both disastrous.
Yeah, so now it does make you wonder whether Conte could do the same. And if he were to leave Napoli, obviously it's been linked with Juventus, would he go back? Because when you go back and you have set such a high standards,
he's won 3 from 3.
Yeah.
And to go back there now and not win, that would tarnish his record. So that's another factor, psychological factor for Mr. Conte there.
Yeah.
Could he now? Everyone's expecting him to leave because he's been linked, and of course all the hysteria on the Twitterati are out there, and they're saying that he's definitely leaving. Whether it's one pundit or another pundit, a pseudo pundit, whoever it is. They've been saying since a couple of months ago that he's probably going to leave, especially if they win the Scudetto. Yeah. Would he have left if they didn't win the Scudetto? I don't think so.
He would have left because he would have demanded more funds to strengthen his team.
Sure, but they've got those funds because they've got Osimhen sale and they've got Kvara's money as well. They sell their players for more than they buy them, most of them.
Sure, but with Conte, it's more of a case of
attracting the players would be an issue.
Yeah, he's not a manager. It's not like a manager that is there for a project. He comes in, he wins,
2 years,
he burns things
and then
he
he
leaves.
Well, he must have thought that he had a chance of winning.
Oh, absolutely. But that's what I was saying. That was my point about would he go back to Juventus? Because everything you read about Antonio Conte is a student of the game and he's an historian of the game insofar that he knows his football history better than probably a lot of his contemporaries. And I know that I read an interview that he did with the Athletic ages ago when he was to the Spurs, and he did mention the fact that like a lot of managers set impossibly high standards for themselves, and then it's hard for them to keep those standards up. So would he go back to Juventus? I don't know. I don't think anyone. I mean, obviously it would be intriguing to see him going back there, but I also just know that he is a winner first and foremost. I don't think he cares where he wins as long as he wins.
Yeah, true.
I think there is an element of unfinished business with Juve because of the manner in which he left in 2014. It was a couple of days in the pre-season, and he basically told Andrea Agnelli, he's like, I actually can't do this, and walked out. And Juve hired Max Allegri the next day. And it burned a lot of bridges at Juve for a long time. And it took him and Andrea Agnelli years to kind of patch things up. And his return had kind of been thrown on the table before. And Agnelli was like, no, he's not coming back because of the way he left.
Yeah,
so
some
I do
bad
think,
blood.
Yeah.
And also the bad blood to live in Napoli now as a hero and going back to
That's the thing. Like
Yeah.
you'd want to leave as a hero, but also at the same time, if he's only 55. So let's think about also in that coach discussion, who else that young had achieved the success he has now at that age?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So-
Which is why I think I hope it's not the case, because I think he's the sort of man. He's, as you said, he's the star, or he's a star in in his own right. I could see him walking away. Like Jurgen Klopp was exhausted and he said, I just can't do this anymore. I could see him.
He did
away.
say, didn't he, that this was the most difficult title he won. Like it was the most exhausting journey. And you could see, obviously, he had the meeting with De Laurentiis this week.
And the Pope.
And the Pope as well. And I could see a scenario where he walks away, but he doesn't necessarily return to Juve. He maybe just takes a sabbatical for a year, assesses his options.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we'll see. If you haven't seen the article, The Pope and Avellino, go and check that out on their website, by the way. The Pope has a big say in football, apparently. Or on Avellino's football success. So they're promoted up
So
to Serie
just
B.
while we're on the subject, was because I saw a picture of the Pope and McTominay. I assume that McTominay allowed the Pope to see him, not vice versa.
Yeah.
Is that what we're at the minute?
Yeah.
Well, especially an American that loves the Premier League
Yeah.
and that Serie A. No
Well,
offense to the Americans out there, but yeah, it'll be a big. I mean, if you just taken the job as Pope, I mean, that's basically the Conte job of the Catholic world there that he's taken on. And he's trying to coach the Vatican now, but which Trapattoni actually coached the Vatican.
Yeah,
a while
remember
back. But meeting McTominay would be epic in your first couple of weeks as Pope.
Yeah, well, obviously, you've probably seen the footage of McTominay dancing with nonnas.
Yes.
And smoking cigarettes. So
Yeah.
obviously, after he's danced with nonnas, then he said, "Okay, now
I
the
think that
Pope
was the
can
night
eat me."
before. I think that was the night before. Then they went to see the Pope.
The bit about him smoking cigarettes, I found it really interesting because I can't believe that it is in this day and age that where social media is
Is it
Well-
a deep fake, maybe?
where social media is so important. I can't believe that someone at the club didn't think of letting them know that might have been a bad look.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you celebrate,
I have
don't you?
no, I have nothing against them. Like having a couple of or like
If it was the night before Friday, the Scudetto
Yeah.
clincher.
McTominay was also down in Tenant Super like a true Scotsman in a bar.
Everyone in
just
Italy
like,
loves
just like Lewis Ferguson, another Scotsman, which Dan interviewed earlier this year. so-
He had a good time as well. I was following stories on Instagram because Bologna celebrated the Coppa Italia and he seemed to be enjoying himself.
Epic season for Scotsmen.
Yeah,
all
I
around.
put it this way. I don't think that Italiano would have got a lot of them out of a training session on Monday if there was a training session.
Yeah, well, they
scheduled.
lost 2 or 3 to end the
Yeah,
season. didn't they?
as soon as they won the Coppa, that was it.
Yeah.
Their season was
But
done.
yeah, they were basically waiting for the parade. And
think-
fair play to them. I mean, it's an aside, Bologna, where the whole city seemed to be turning out, red and blue, wherever you looked.
Well,
so
I mean, the
yeah,
epic
fair-
scenes there
fair
as well.
play to them, absolutely.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, winning a Coppa Italia for them is like winning the Scudetto in Naples because it's also the first year that I've discovered since the year 2000, 2001, that season there, that two teams outside the big three of Juve, Inter, and Milan have won the Scudetto and the Coppa
Yeah.
Italia.
Yeah.
Back then it was Roma and Fiorentina. This time it's Napoli and Bologna, and that's something we don't see it. It's very
no,
rare.
we don't.
Yeah.
But this is a season. It's an anomaly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the players he was able to fine tune to win this because he obviously recycled Lukaku. When you compare Lukaku to this season compared to last when he was at Roma, there's a bit of a difference there. I guess I'm not sure how many goals he scored at Roma. I might look that up right now. But Lukaku,
I think he scored 20.
Yeah, 20 and all,
Lukaku.
all comps.
Yeah.
okay, so he's still got plenty of goals in Roma,
Yeah.
but obviously different setup,
Yeah.
different. And there's my point. At Inter, he was able to coach him. Obviously, he was a bit younger, a bit faster, a bit stronger. Now he's slowed down a bit, and Conte was still able to get him to a Scudetto as the linchpin up forward and just use whatever strengths he has left. He's still strong in a lot of areas,
Yeah.
Lukaku, especially with assists this year.
Yeah, I mean, no one contributed more assists in Serie A than Lukaku.
Yeah.
Which, if you had told the three of us at the beginning of the year that Lukaku would lead the league for assists, you were like, nah. You're
No,
crazy.
absolutely. I mean, I wrote a piece earlier this season, at the beginning of the season, and I said, if Lukaku doesn't score at least 15 goals, there's no chance that Napoli are going to win the league.
Yeah.
And, he's obviously proved me wrong, proved us all wrong. But again, I think that speaks to Conte's profile and to his sort of like the strength that he's got as a manager, because Lukaku is the sort of player who you can see he adores Conte and he just buys into everything that Conte says and everything that Conte sets out to do. Because I think that Lukaku could be told by Conte, I don't want you to even have a shot on goal because that's going to get us to win the game. And he probably wouldn't have a shot on goal.
Yeah.
He'll happily sacrifice himself for the team, for the greater good. And that's, I mean, only the really elite managers can have that impact on players.
Yeah. Well, you've seen the new Lukaku this season because obviously we've all watched him for years. He's 32, but he has a lot of mileage on the clock.
Yeah.
He's been playing professional football since he was 16.
It's his lowest scoring season.
Yeah.
This is.
Yeah. But what we saw this season was a lot of Lukaku playing with his back to goal.
Yeah.
And sliding. McTominay would run in behind.
Yeah.
And Gisa would run in behind. And that's where he got a lot of his
It
assists.
takes a puppet master to know how to play that football. And
He
that's
does, yeah.
Conte again.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Lukaku said that he hated that part of his game. But when the two of them were at Inter, Conte was like, if you don't do this, you're not playing for me.
Yeah.
And Lukaku then said that I'm glad that he made me modify my game because that's what I hated doing, but it made me a better player.
Yeah, I mean, you could arguably say that he's extended his career because Lukaku, as a traditional centre forward, was maybe not on the way out, but it was definitely on the
He's only 32, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah,
But there's a lot of mileage in those
Sure,
legs.
there's a lot of mileage because he started very young.
Yeah.
And
Belgian
I
league.
think actually, I mean, someone pointed out to me on Twitter the other day. Now I forgot who it was, but this is the first season that you kept hearing the word intelligent and footballers applied to Lukaku, which is extraordinary when you think, as Emmet said, he's been playing professional football since he was 16 and he's played for some of the biggest clubs
That's a good point.
in the world.
Because you can have all the talent, but
Yeah,
you still have to have that IQ.
And he is an incredibly intelligent footballer. But again, did he take Antonio Conte to sort of like unlock the other side of his game?
Especially be able to increase his football IQ while the other powers are going down.
Yeah.
To sort of keep him up around, I don't know, if we were looking at Football Manager, maybe he'd be at 85. But he decreased in his speed and his strength. And
Yeah.
that. Well,
Yeah.
strength I don't think so actually, but
Yeah.
speed
Yeah.
definitely. And even the way he was finishing, the way he used to, 64 goals at Inter. And we all remember some of those goals. He would sprint through and just carve defenses
Yeah.
up like he's playing rugby union on the wing.
Yeah.
And just go in and smash it past the keeper. This time, there's very rarely any of those goals, but we did see the one for 2-0 against Cagliari where he was able to push
Yeah.
off, get around. It was Cagliari's defense, and they had a couple of their second string players in there, but still, the way he was able to
That was
get away.
old school
That was
Lukaku.
proper.
That was old school,
I mean,
yeah.
I tweeted that there was the sight of him and Jeremina going head to head was just like watching Premier League years.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, it was also like Rocky Balboa coming back for like Rocky 4 and
but, joking aside, that Lukaku's main criticism when he was in England was the fact that he was overweight, that his physique was what it was. He's looked much better now. Like, he looks incredibly trim.
I think
compared-
this is the trimmest that he's been
Yeah.
in his career.
It's incredible. He looks, as you said, he looks like a rugby player.
Yeah.
He looks incredibly trim, incredibly focused, and incredibly lean. And I think it was telling that he didn't have any injuries this season. Because Lukaku has always had a bit of a sort of patch.
he played a lot of games. What did he play? 36, 37
Yeah.
games.
Yeah.
And there are other couple of good players there, but just firstly, I'll mention of all the seasons where he's played at least sort of 10 games, he hasn't been injured or he's not coming through as a junior because he made that transition from Belgium to the Premier League. This is his worst scoring season. So that part has come down. His assists have gone up.
Yeah.
But let's have a think about some of the other players that have been immense for Conte. He got 38 games out of Rachmani.
Yeah.
It was good to see him with his little Kosovo flag on, celebrating afterwards and
It
doing his
was
bit.
superb this season.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
superb. And he's going to be in my Serie A team of the season, which you should watch also on YouTube and our website. But Romani, Meret was okay. I think he was better under Spalletti in that season. He played a bit better, but he had a better, very, very tight defense in front of him this season. And again, Conte had to use his chess pieces to bring in Juan Jesus for a few games. And then he's tried even Rafa Marin, who's still young. And then at the end, the masterstroke for me is Matias Oliveira in a three-man defense as a left centre-back. And then you've got Spinazzola in front of him. And those two can both play, although you wouldn't rate Spinazzola as a central defender or a three-man defender, but he definitely can cover for a few minutes so that Oliveira gets back. And so you've got that left-back symmetry, one left-back to another, playing further up the field. We've also seen Spinazzola play as one of the front attackers, as a left winger when Cavada left, and also
Yeah, in a 4-3-3
Neres
was
was out.
the left-sided
so
attacker.
We've seen him be able to manufacture something when he needed to, and that's what a world-class coach needs to do.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure other coaches would have been able to come in. Even Mazzocchi was able to do a job left or right. The way Di Lorenzo played, he played nearly every game. I think Romani only missed out on about 20 minutes of the season.
Yeah.
Still played every game.
Yeah.
So Di Lorenzo, immense. What do you think of the Capitano?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it off air. Like last season, Di Lorenzo was shocking. I genuinely thought he was finished.
And he was off to Juventus at the time, apparently.
Yeah, and Conte convinced him to stay, and he's got a tune out of him again. He's brought him back, not to the swashbuckling right back that he was 2 or 3 in the 2023 Scudetto season, but just a solid defender. Can still get up and down, maybe not to the same degree, but Conte has definitely revitalized Di Lorenzo.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's not as big a redemption story, but Zambo and Gisa has been.
Yeah, he's been fantastic as well.
I
Phenomenal.
think I cannot get my head around the fact that he's not consistently talked about as one of the best midfielders in Europe, because he's got an incredible engine. He's brilliant. His reading of the game is second to none in Serie A, and he can score goals. It's just not flashy, But again, you look at the game against Atalanta in Bergamo. It's like 80 minutes of football, high-octane football, back and forth, and it's him who has the present mind of slowing down.
His awareness.
Yeah, exactly. The
So
awareness.
good.
He slows everything down, and he picks Lukaku out, and it's 3-2 Napoli. They don't win that game. Who knows where they go?
And his feet are exceptional.
Yeah.
Like, really, that they are.
Yeah.
And the way he can look around, his peripheral vision is up there with some of the best. Don't want to say Pirlo-esque peripheral vision, but it is up there, and you have to be able to play that role in the center of midfield.
Yeah.
Sometimes he plays in the half space a bit more advanced.
Yeah.
It depends where Antonio Conte needed him as well. So, Anguissa, obviously, there's McTominay. Lobotka was phenomenal, but when he was injured, the way that Conte was able to bring Billy Gilmore into the mix, because he had to play the last few games as well. So
and he hardly got a kick, Billy Gilmore, in the first half of the
First half of
season.
the season,
But then Conte was confident enough to put him in the business end.
there's something weird about Conte only ever started him against Inter.
Yeah.
And then his next
Yeah.
start was
Against
Inter.
Inter 3 months later.
And that was like him saying, okay, you've fare la gavetta, you've been able to go through and qualify for to come and play more regularly.
But
Against
again-
Inter, maybe that was another thing where he wanted to surprise Inzaghi, where it's like, well, you weren't expecting Gilmore on the side, were you? Bang, you're going to have to account for that. So that's another psychological battle between some of these world-class coaches. Inzaghi against Conte. Conte knows that he doesn't have the firepower. Like, look at Inter's midfield compared to this. If we've said before, McTominay himself would never have expected to come and win this Scudetto. Of course, you always got that burning desire that you can achieve anything, and given the right platform, you can win. But some of these players, he had 7 starters on the weekend from the Scudetto winning side under Spalletti, but there's no Osimhen, no Kvara, no Kim, no Zielinski. The others were there to sort of form the armor around those superstars,
Which is why I
had to replace them.
Obviously, the discourse has dominated the last, certainly since Friday, and even before that. There's this sort of this question that dominates the headline is, what were United thinking about letting McTominay go? Sure, I think McTominay would have had a place for United, but the Scott McTominay that we've seen under Conte is not the Scott McTominay that we've seen.
And that's Conte getting it out.
That is
Ten Hag couldn't
Conte
do
taking
it.
out, and that's not disrespect to McTominay, because it was a very serviceable squad player at United, but it was not this player. Yeah. This was it's like saying that it's like, I don't know, you're talking about a player who scores 20 goals a season after going through 3 seasons where he barely has a shot on goal. It was not this player. Conte made him this player.
Yeah. And that's the thing with Italian coaches. Emmet can speak to this as well. The way Italian coaches can always squeeze out 15, 20% more. It's kind of like Italians bargaining for a deal. It's like trying to get that extra bit for less or for nothing.
The old finger on the scale.
Yeah, hold the finger on the prosciutto scale. But it is like that somehow, and you can see it when they go to look what Ranieri did at Leicester. I mean, what you can get out of some of these Italian coaches, I guess that's why they're so in demand when they go around. And Conte was linked with Manchester United a couple of years ago. What do you think of how Italian coaches are able to achieve this?
Well, funny you mentioned Ranieri at Leicester. That season, he turned Robert Huth into prime Cannavaro for 1 year. Yeah. Just they have this nous.
Huthavaro.
Yeah. They have this nous of just knowing, right, you're being underutilized in a certain area of the pitch. I'm going to put you in your proper position. And Conte is a prime example of that. He's just, obviously, we talked about him as a coach. He's coaching McTominay to be a better version of what he was. And obviously, Dan could know more about this than we do. At United, I feel like he was used in wrong positions.
Absolutely. He didn't have a position. He was used as a sort of, it was just as a sort of jack of all trades, but without excelling in any of those
You could see the
trades.
talent. He was able to assist and score. Scored 7 last season.
Yeah.
I told you the moment it's on, he's got a great engine. He's going to do really well in Serie A. Obviously, I didn't expect him to be this good.
Oh, when you sent me the link, I was wrapped. But when I saw that Napoli were linked with him, because I'd seen him play a few times for United last season, I thought, this guy's great. Like the way he's a workhorse, he gets up and down. And Conte has been able to see something in him, and I guess Italian clubs have a lot less money to spend. So with the budget in mind, you go and have a look at what is around in the other top leagues, and he's identified McTominay and said, he has everything I need. I'm going to bring him over and I'm going to amplify what he's got.
Yeah.
And that's the magic of Antonio Conte. So
Yeah.
I think we can probably wrap it up soon. But where do you think what's going to happen next? Let's talk about where to now for Antonio Conte. I would love him to stay in Naples and try and win again. We don't usually see it with coaches, especially in the last 30, 40 years, that they want to stay at a smaller club. Napoli are a smaller club. They're not in the big three. They're definitely in the big 5 or 6. Roma and Lazio in there. Fiorentina, we could all debate all day about who's big and who's small. But what is going to happen? I would love him to stay, hypothetically. He's still contracted. Keep players like Anguissa who are coming off contract, but they've got the option to sign him again. Try and keep this squad intact, whether he keeps Lukaku or not. But I would love to see him even let Lukaku go, bring in another striker and do the same. Bring out the best in that player and win it again. It will just reinforce how great he is.
I think for the league, I would like to see him stay for the league because I think having Conte in Serie A makes Serie A better.
But you wanted to Juventus, don't
No,
you?
no. Even if he stayed at Napoli, it means that if he stays at Napoli, it means that De Laurentiis has managed to convince him, look, we're going to spend X amount of money.
Yeah.
We're going to bring in reinforcements. We're going to give you who you want.
And they've got the money.
Yeah,
They've
they
got
have the money.
now.
As you said, once, the Kivara money, Champions League money, I think it's projected that Napoli will earn about 45 million euros already before a ball's kicked. Before, you could win bonuses and all the rest.
Well, there's another McTominay and a half.
Yeah, and they get Osimhen money.
Might be a Garnacho, this right?
Oh,
Yeah.
well, I mean, imagine Garnacho coming in.
Yeah,
And again, what Garnacho's done at United, imagine what Conte could do with him.
yeah.
It would be.
I'll be curious to see
insane.
Conte dealing with Garnacho's brother more than anything else, but that's for another podcast.
Okay, yeah, we'll talk about that. I've got no ideas about that. But
And I think a strong Napoli is good for Italy in European football.
do you think that players in the Premier League will think, look at what he's done for McTominay and Gilmore and Lukaku. I would like him to do that for me, and that could be a draw
I
card.
think so. And we were talking about Bologna earlier. I think they're probably thinking about that with Ferguson and Italiano and Thiago Motta as well.
Yeah.
I would like him to stay in Napoli. I can't see him stay in Napoli. I think if he stays in Napoli, he'll be gone at some point next season because is the marriage between him and De Laurentiis is a marriage of convenience rather than true love. Oh, that's the way it comes across anyway.
Well, he said that. He said, me and De Laurentiis were both winners, but we do it in different ways.
Yeah.
From a personal standpoint, and I agree that it's great that he stays at Juventus, but I would love to see Antonio Conte at AC Milan.
Oh, okay. I thought he was going to say Manchester United there for a second.
No, it will never take over United. I think he's smart enough to know that there are matches there. Why would he touch with the ball?
Would he take the Lecce job before that?
I think he probably would. And would you blame him? I wouldn't.
I don't think he will go to Milan because if you remember what Zlatan said last summer, we want a coach and not a manager. Conte is just too fiery for what Milan want. Milan wants someone who'll come in and say, yes,
They want a yes man,
thank you, sir.
exactly, yeah.
These are your players. Thank you, sir. I'll work with these.
But,
Conte is not that.
I would just like, the thought of, and I think it's like if Antonio Conte were to take over Milan, he will be back to the hilt by the fans.
Yeah.
Because the fans are desperate for someone
Yeah.
like him, someone who can come in, read their eye attack to the player and tell them, you either follow me or you're out the door.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, I mean, we can all agree Antonio Conte has been amazing this season. Loads of Premier League clubs, the PSGs of the world, the Bayerns would all love to have him. We'll see what's going to happen with him in the next few months. We definitely know he's going to be, at the FIFA Best Awards. They're going to put him in the top, in the front runners as Coach of the Year in many different regards. Serie A Coach of the Year for sure. And let's pay a tribute to Antonio Conte. Let us know what you think in the comments. Is he the best coach or not? Everyone, you have an image of Conte in front of you. Lift it and hail the great man. Dan included there.
Oh, do I? Okay.
Yes, everyone. Antonio Conte. Is this man the best coach in the world? Let us know what you think.